I never saw it coming. People say that, don't they? That they never saw it coming when their life changes in an instant. But the truth is, I was so deep in the fog of denial, so sure that everything was fine, that I could have been hit by a truck and still not realized how badly I was being blindsided. This all started because of one thing, an odd feeling. You know, that weird, unexplainable feeling that gnaws at the back of your mind, like a distant echo. It wasn't something I could put my finger on, but it was there. Every time I looked at my wife, Olivia, I saw her. Yes, but I didn't really see her. She'd smile at me, just like she always did, but it felt forced. Her touch? Cool. Distant. Even when I tried to hold her hand, it felt like I was holding a stranger's. And don't get me wrong, we weren't having huge arguments or fights. It wasn't like she had suddenly turned into someone completely different. It was just off. A quiet kind of off. I tried to talk to her about it, of course, but every time, she'd brush me off with the same line, "I'm just tired." Or, "Work has been crazy, you know that." She'd always have an explanation. Always. But the thing about being married for 6 years and living together even longer is that you start to notice the small things. You start to notice the way someone looks at their phone, the way they turn it face down when they're near you, or how they suddenly start spending more time at work events or friend get-togethers without a solid reason. I'll be honest, I started snooping. At first, I told myself it was just curiosity. But eventually, I began to convince myself it was a necessity. I had to know the truth. Every night I'd go to bed thinking that maybe this time, everything would be back to normal. But the unease lingered. I wasn't always like this. I wasn't the jealous type, the controlling type. That's just not me. But something changed, and I couldn't shake it off. One night, after Olivia had gone out for what I assumed was another one of her mysterious work meetings, I decided to check her emails. The nagging feeling had become too strong to ignore. I wish I hadn't. I found a single thread in her inbox that stood out to me. It wasn't that she had been hiding emails. No, she was careful. She had that down to an art. But this thread, the subject line alone, it stopped me in my tracks. "I'll be waiting for you at the hotel. Same time, same place." I'm not proud of what I did next, but I couldn't help myself. I opened the email, my hands trembling. It was from a man named Chris, someone I'd never heard of. The email was casual enough, a bit playful even, but there was something about the tone that felt too familiar, too personal. They had been in contact for months. The way he talked to her, my wife, was intimate, in a way that made my skin crawl. At that moment, I knew. I knew everything. All the little things that I had brushed off in the past suddenly made sense. The quiet late-night phone calls, the unexplained absences, the sudden business trips that seemed to happen with increasing frequency. And now, an email to a stranger about meeting at a hotel. I sat there, reading and rereading the email over and over, unable to believe what I was seeing. The worst part? I wasn't angry yet. I wasn't even sad. I just felt numb. I felt like I had been living in a dream, and now I was suddenly awake. I didn't go to bed that night. Instead, I put the laptop down and tried to think. What was I going to do? Confront her? Ask her about it? Or maybe I should just watch. Watch and wait. I chose to wait. The next evening, she told me she was going out again. She smiled and kissed me on the cheek, telling me she'd be back in a couple of hours. But I knew that this time, I wasn't going to let her go without knowing everything. So I followed her. It wasn't hard. I had learned her routine over the years, and it wasn't much of a stretch to know where she was going. She got into her car, and I got into mine, keeping a safe distance behind. We drove for about 25 minutes, until she turned into a parking lot I knew well. The parking lot of a hotel. I stayed parked on the street, a few blocks away, watching her. She got out of the car and walked into the hotel, her head held high, almost as if she knew I was watching her. I didn't follow. I stayed in my car, watching her every move. I didn't know how long I sat there, but it felt like hours. Eventually, a man came out of the hotel, Chris. They walked out together, and I saw them kiss. It wasn't a quick peck either. It was a slow, deliberate kiss. The kind of kiss I used to give her. That was it. The moment I knew, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that I had been living a lie. But instead of rushing in there, instead of doing something stupid, I stayed calm. I waited. I watched. And I told myself one thing. I wasn't going to confront her like a fool. I was going to make her face the truth on my terms. And so I left. I didn't go home immediately. I needed time to think. I needed a plan. I didn't know what to do next. But I knew this much. I wasn't going to let her think she could get away with it. I wish I could say I went home that night, confronted her, and demanded the truth. I wish I could say I felt rage or even sadness. But the truth is, I felt nothing at all, just this emptiness, like I had been hollowed out. I could feel the silence of the house when I walked back in, the quiet of a life that no longer seemed real. It was as if the walls themselves knew that something had irrevocably changed. Olivia came home late that night, just like she always did. She smiled, said she was tired, and kissed me on the cheek. But I wasn't fooled. I could see it in her eyes. The way her pupils dilated when she saw me. The way she took a moment too long to look at me. Almost like she was waiting for me to say something. Waiting for me to know what she'd been doing. But I didn't say anything. I just smiled back. The kind of smile that hides everything. The kind of smile I'd been wearing for weeks now, pretending like everything was fine when, in reality, I felt like I was about to drown in my own thoughts. The next morning, I woke up early. I didn't want to wake Olivia up. I needed time to think, to plan. I was supposed to be working, but I couldn't concentrate. Every time I looked at the screen, all I could think about was the image of her walking into that hotel with him. I tried to focus on the usual distractions, calls, emails, errands, but nothing worked. My mind kept replaying the same scene. Her in the parking lot, walking with him, kissing him like she had never kissed me. And that kiss, I couldn't get it out of my head. It was the kind of kiss that says, I'm yours, not just a fleeting moment of affection. I spent the day in a daze. But then, the thought hit me. She thinks I don't know. She's walking around, completely oblivious to the fact that I've seen everything, that I know everything. And that's when it clicked. If I was going to confront her, it couldn't just be an argument. It couldn't just be about me being angry or hurt. It had to be about her realizing that the illusion we had built together had shattered, that everything she thought was hidden was out in the open now. I wasn't going to let her think I was weak or clueless. I needed to be calm, calculated, and I needed to make her see that she had crossed a line that she couldn't uncross. So, I began to make plans. I didn't go home immediately after work that day. Instead, I went to the hotel where I had seen them together. I needed to understand how deep this was, how far it had gone. When I walked into the lobby, the smell of fresh coffee and cleaning supplies hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt out of place, like an intruder in a world that wasn't mine. But I pushed those feelings aside. I approached the front desk. The receptionist was busy with paperwork, but she glanced up as I approached. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice polite but distant. I took a deep breath. I need to know if a guest checked in recently. Name's Chris Maxwell. Room number. Just a moment ago. She hesitated for a second, then typed something into the computer. The seconds dragged on, every beat of my heart louder than the last. But she smiled and said, "Room 305. He's with a guest." I almost laughed at how easy it was. But then, I realized something. I didn't need to confront him. I didn't need to confront Olivia right now. The pieces were falling into place. It wasn't just about her and him. It was about me. About my dignity. And about the one thing I was not going to let her take from me. Control. I left the hotel and went home that night, trying to act normal. I knew Olivia was going to be home soon. I didn't want her to suspect anything. So I put on the act. I made dinner, poured 2 glasses of wine, and set everything up as if I hadn't just been to the hotel, as if I hadn't seen everything. She came in, just like I knew she would. She smelled like the perfume I bought her last year, the same scent she always wore when she was trying to impress someone. She sat down across from me, smiled, and we talked about the weather, about how work was going, about anything but what was really on our minds. But I couldn't keep it up for long. I had to know. I asked her casually, "How was your day? Did you meet with Chris?" Her hand froze midair as she was reaching for the wine. The slight shift in her expression was enough for me to know that I had her. She knew I knew. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity before she spoke, her voice shaking, but trying to hold steady. "I don't know what you're talking about." I didn't react. I just smiled and said, "I think you do, Lydia. I think you know exactly what I'm talking about." Her face turned pale, and for the first time in a long time, I saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. Not guilt, not regret, but fear. Fear of getting caught. Fear of losing everything. But I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. Instead, I leaned forward. "Here's the thing, Lydia. I'm not going to beg you to explain. I'm not going to lose my mind over this. But I want you to know this. I'm not your fool. You don't get to keep me in the dark, and you don't get to lie to me anymore. Her eyes widened. I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was trying to come up with something, anything, to fix this, to cover it up. But there was no fixing it. I got up from the table and walked to the living room. I had nothing more to say to her right now, but I knew that whatever happened next, I was in control, and I wasn't going to let her play this game anymore. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling as the seconds stretched into hours. Olivia's words, or the lack of them, kept echoing in my mind. I don't know what you're talking about. That feigned innocence, the same act she'd put on over and over again. But this time, something was different. This time, I saw through it. I kept asking myself why she thought she could get away with it. Did she think I was blind? That I couldn't see what was happening right in front of me? She had always been the type of person who thrived on control, on having everyone around her convinced that she was perfect. But somewhere along the way, she slipped. I had caught a glimpse of the truth, and now there was no turning back. The next morning, I woke up early. She was still asleep beside me, her face peaceful, unaware that everything she'd carefully hidden was on the verge of unraveling. I didn't want to confront her immediately. Not yet. I needed to make sure I had everything in place first. I needed proof. I needed something more than just the hotel, the text messages, and the way she had acted when I'd mentioned Chris. So, I started following her. I knew it was dangerous, but it was the only way to get the answers I needed. The only way to show her I wasn't going to be some passive observer in my own life anymore. For the next few days, I kept a low profile. I watched her leave for meetings that always seemed to run late. I observed how she'd step out of the car, her phone in hand, looking around to see if anyone was watching. She wasn't careful. She just thought she could keep everything under control. But she was wrong. One afternoon, I followed her to a park. I wasn't sure what was going on, but she parked, got out, and started walking. She wasn't alone. I spotted Chris, walking toward her from the other side of the park. The way they locked eyes when they saw each other sent a chill down my spine. There was no hesitation, no shame. They met in the middle of the park, just like they had rehearsed it 1,000 times before. They talked for a few minutes, laughing quietly, their bodies close, too close. Then, Chris leaned in and kissed her. Not just a quick kiss, but a lingering one, a kiss that spoke volumes about their connection. The kind of kiss I hadn't received in months. The kind of kiss that made me question everything I thought I knew about our marriage. I stood there, hidden behind a tree, my heart racing, my hands clenched into fists. I should have felt angry, but instead, I felt numb. The only thing that was clear to me was that Olivia had made her choice, and I was no longer part of the picture. I couldn't tell her that I knew. Not yet. The game was only just beginning. When they finally broke apart, I followed them back to the hotel. I was calm now, collected. I knew what I had to do. I needed to be strategic. The confrontation could wait. What I needed was leverage. That night, after Olivia came home, I acted as though nothing had changed. We had dinner together, just like we always did. She tried to make small talk, asking about my day, but I couldn't keep up the facade. I could barely look her in the eye. I was walking on a razor's edge, teetering between confronting her or waiting for her to slip again. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I turned to her. "Olivia," I said, my voice calm, almost too calm. "You've been seeing him again, haven't you? Chris, I mean." She froze. Her fork paused halfway to her mouth, her eyes widening ever so slightly. For a moment, there was silence. I could see the gears turning in her head as she tried to come up with a response. But I wasn't going to let her. "I'm not stupid," I continued. "I know everything. The hotel, the texts, the kiss in the park. You think I don't see it? You think I don't feel it?" My voice was steady, controlled, but underneath it, there was a coldness that seemed to fill the room. Her face drained of color. For a moment, she said nothing, and then she opened her mouth, but no words came out. She was caught. There was no denying it anymore. I stood up and walked toward the window, looking out at the city below. "Here's the thing, Olivia," I said, my back turned to her. "I don't care about your excuses. I don't care about the lies. What I care about is how you think I'm just supposed to sit here and let this happen. How you think I'm going to be the fool who doesn't notice." The tension in the room was unbearable. I could hear her shifting behind me, but I didn't turn around. "I've spent the last few days watching you, Olivia. Watching you lie, watching you betray me. And do you know what I've realized? I paused for a moment, letting the words sink in. I'm done. I'm done being the man who gets walked all over. Her voice finally broke through the silence. Dorian, I didn't mean, but I cut her off, my voice firm and unyielding. No, no more explanations. You've had your chance. You've had enough time to come clean. But you didn't. So now it's my turn. You're going to see exactly how much control you really have in this situation. She didn't speak again after that. She didn't need to. The silence between us spoke volumes. She knew what was coming. She knew the life she had built with me, the life that had once seemed so perfect, was crumbling to pieces. And there was nothing she could do to stop it. The next few days were a blur, a tangled mess of moments that I can barely recall. I kept my distance from Olivia, even when she tried to act like everything was normal. I could see the guilt in her eyes whenever she looked at me, but she was still trying to play her part. She was still trying to keep up the facade. But it wasn't working. Not anymore. I knew she was waiting for me to crack, for me to lash out or beg for answers. She probably thought I'd ask her to explain, maybe even ask for a divorce. But I wasn't playing her game. Not anymore. She tried calling me a few times during the day, but I didn't pick up. She even texted me, saying, "Can we talk? Please." I didn't respond. The only thing I wanted was to watch her squirm, to feel the weight of the lies she had built come crashing down on her. By the time Friday came around, I had a plan. I had made some calls, gathered some information, and set things in motion. I wasn't just going to confront Olivia. I was going to destroy the image she had built up for herself. I wasn't going to let her walk away from this unscathed. She had taken everything from me without a second thought, and now it was my turn. Olivia didn't know it yet, but she was about to lose everything. I wasn't going to be the guy who sat around, waiting for an apology. I was going to be the one who took control. I knew she was going to meet Chris again. She thought I didn't know, but I did. She had already been out of the house for hours at this point, and I knew she was on her way to see him. I watched her from the window as she stepped into the car, looking as composed as ever. She smiled at me when she passed by, but I didn't smile back. Instead, I turned my attention to the phone in my hand. I had made the call earlier that day to her work, to her best friend, and to a few people she'd never expect. I was getting everything lined up, and now it was time. I left the house quietly, heading out to a small cafe near the hotel where I had seen Olivia and Chris together. I had made sure she'd see me. I wanted her to know I was there, watching, knowing what she was doing. I ordered a coffee and sat by the window, my eyes scanning the street for any sign of her. It didn't take long. She arrived first, stepping out of her car and walking into the hotel with that same confident, almost smug expression. The way she held herself made me sick. She didn't even glance around, didn't check for anyone who might be watching. She was so sure of herself, so sure that she could get away with it. I waited a while longer, just long enough for her to get settled. Then, I stood up and left the cafe, taking my time as I walked down the street. I wasn't rushing. I was taking my time, savoring the moment. When I reached the hotel, I didn't go inside immediately. Instead, I stood outside, just out of view of the front door, and waited. I didn't have to wait long. It wasn't long before Chris showed up. He was dressed in a dark jacket, walking with a casual air, completely unaware that I was standing just a few feet away from him. They didn't see me as they embraced in the lobby, and I could see the way their bodies moved together, too familiar, too intimate. I felt my stomach twist, but I didn't let it show. I wasn't going to let them have the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. Not now. Not when everything I had planned was about to unfold. I stepped inside the hotel and walked toward the elevator, making sure to keep my head down and not draw attention to myself. I wasn't there to cause a scene. I wasn't there to make a fool of myself. I was there to make her feel the consequences of her actions. The elevator ride up to the third floor was agonizingly slow. I pressed the button for the room where I knew they'd be. Room 305. As the doors opened, I stepped out into the hallway, walking silently toward the door. I knocked once, twice. It wasn't long before the door opened, revealing Olivia standing there, looking shocked and pale. She tried to hide her surprise behind a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Dorian, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice shaky, almost as if she hadn't expected me to be there. I didn't say a word. Instead, I pushed past her into the room. There they were, standing there together, Chris looking uncomfortable, unsure of what was happening. Olivia's eyes darted between me and Chris, her face pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I turned to Chris and gave him a cold smile. "You must be Chris," I said, my voice laced with contempt. "You've been spending a lot of time with my wife." Chris looked between me and Olivia, his face a mix of confusion and guilt. I don't know what this is about," he started, but I wasn't interested in his excuses. I turned to Olivia. "You thought I didn't know, didn't you?" I said, my voice steady calm. "You thought I'd just sit here and watch you destroy everything we've built. But now here we are, you and your little affair." Olivia's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't say anything. She just stood there, her hands shaking. I had no sympathy for her. Not anymore. "I'm done, Olivia," I said, my words final. "You wanted to play a game. But this time, I'm the one in control." The silence that followed was deafening. The truth was out. The curtain had been pulled back, and there was no hiding anymore. Olivia was exposed, her lies laid bare before me. But I wasn't going to let her run away from this. I wasn't going to give her an easy escape. She was going to face the consequences, just like I had. The tension in that hotel room was unbearable. Olivia stood frozen, staring at me as though she couldn't believe what was happening. Her mouth opened and closed, as if she were trying to form words, but nothing came out. Chris was still standing in the background, awkwardly shifting his weight from foot to foot, clearly uncomfortable but not sure how to get himself out of this mess. I could hear the faint hum of the hotel's air conditioning, the only sound in the otherwise silent room. Olivia's perfume filled the air, a scent that had once been so familiar to me, but now it was tainted. Every second that passed made me feel more certain of my decision. I had spent too long in the dark, too long ignoring the cracks in our marriage. But now, I was done being passive. I wasn't going to let this slip by. "Chris, right?" I finally said, turning to face him. "Tell me, how long has this been going on?" I wasn't angry yet. No, anger wasn't the emotion I was feeling. What I felt was something much colder: disappointment, betrayal, the feeling of being played, and the overwhelming realization that I'd allowed it to happen for too long. Chris hesitated for a moment, his eyes darting between Olivia and me. His discomfort was obvious, but there was something about his expression, something that told me he knew exactly what he had gotten himself into. He was no fool. He had been well aware of what he was doing, and yet, he had still made the choice to be a part of this. He hadn't cared. This isn't what you think," Chris muttered, his voice faltering. But the words were weak, insincere. I didn't want his excuses. Not now. Not when I was standing there, looking at the woman I had shared a life with, the woman who had lied to me, deceived me, betrayed me. I turned to Olivia, my gaze locking onto hers. The tears were finally starting to spill down her cheeks, but there was no sympathy in my heart for her. I had been the one who had lived with the lies, the one who had trusted her. And now, all of it was crashing down around us. "You can't keep lying to me, Olivia," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, though the words felt like they were cutting through the air. "I wasn't lying," she finally said, her voice shaking. It's complicated." "Complicated?" I laughed bitterly. "There's nothing complicated about betrayal. You didn't just slip up, Olivia. You chose this." I took a step closer to her, watching her flinch ever so slightly, as if my words were physically hurting her. I couldn't bring myself to care. "You made this choice every single time you met with him, every single time you kissed him. And now here we are." Her shoulders shook as she tried to hold herself together. She looked so small, so fragile in that moment, and for a second, I almost felt bad. But then I remembered everything. The sleepless nights, the nagging doubts, the way she had dismissed me when I had tried to reach out, when I had tried to talk to her. The guilt I felt in that moment quickly faded away. Chris cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the emotional weight in the room. "I didn't mean for it to happen this way," he said, trying to sound apologetic, but there was no real regret in his voice. "It's just, I care about Olivia." I turned my gaze back to him. "You care about her? Funny, I didn't see much care in that kiss you two shared. You knew she was married, and yet here you are, trying to play the good guy? Don't act like you're the victim, Chris." I could see him start to shrink, his facade crumbling. But there was still something in me that wanted more, something more than just this confrontation. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she had done. I needed her to understand the cost of her choices. She had taken something precious from me, and now, I was going to make sure she saw it. Olivia, I said, turning my attention back to her. I'm not going to beg you to explain. I'm not going to plead for you to stay. But I want you to know that whatever you thought you were building with him, it's over. This is the end of the road for us. You've made your decision, and so have I. She opened her mouth to protest, but I raised a hand to stop her. I wasn't interested in hearing her excuses anymore. The damage was done, and no amount of pleading was going to fix it. This is my decision, Olivia. I'm done. The finality in my voice made her stop. She knew I meant it. I could see it in her eyes. She knew that there was no going back. For a moment, there was a stillness in the room. No one moved. No one spoke. Then, without another word, I turned to leave. As I stepped toward the door, I heard Olivia's voice again, soft and broken. Dorian, please. But I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I had already given her too many chances to come clean, too many chances to show me that she still cared. But those chances were gone now. This was the only way forward, for both of us. I walked out of the hotel room, leaving the woman I had once loved, the woman I had shared my life with, standing there with the man who had torn it all apart. The sound of the door closing behind me was the only thing I heard. And in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the beginning of something new. A life where I wasn't bound by lies. A life where I was in control. And that felt like freedom. The moment I walked out of that hotel room, I felt an unsettling calm wash over me. It was as if a storm had passed, leaving behind an eerie stillness. But I knew better. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I had made my decision. But Olivia, she had no idea what was coming next. She thought the hardest part was the confrontation. She thought the worst was her guilt, her tears, the shock of getting caught. But I had other plans. I wanted her to feel the weight of her actions. I wanted her to know how much everything had changed. For the next few days, I stayed silent. I didn't reach out to her. I didn't send any texts, no calls, nothing. The silence between us was suffocating. But I wasn't the only one feeling the pressure. Olivia was frantic. She tried calling me over and over, but I ignored her. I didn't need to hear her excuses. I didn't need to hear her pretend that everything could go back to normal. It wasn't just about what she had done with Chris. It was about the years of deceit, the lies she had weaved so expertly into our relationship, the way she had taken my trust and shattered it. It wasn't something I could just brush off. She thought she could erase the truth with a few apologetic words. But I wasn't going to let her. I knew she was starting to unravel. I saw it in the way she carried herself when we crossed paths at home. She tried to be casual, acting like nothing had changed. But there was no hiding it. The walls were closing in on her. She couldn't escape the truth. She couldn't escape the fact that I knew everything now. I didn't want to drag it out. I didn't want to waste time playing games. So, I made the call. I contacted an attorney. I needed to start the process. I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to waste another minute in a marriage built on lies. I needed to take control, to reclaim what had been stolen from me. But I wasn't going to make it easy for Olivia. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of thinking she could walk away with no consequences. The day I went to see the lawyer, I left Olivia a note. A short one. A simple one. But in those few lines, I said everything that needed to be said. I've already taken the first step. Divorce papers are being filed. I'm done, Olivia. I didn't expect her to show up at the office. I didn't expect her to confront me there, but she did. I could see it in her eyes the moment she walked in. The realization that I wasn't just talking. This wasn't just a fight. This was the end. She had pushed me too far, and now there was no going back. You really think this is it? She asked, her voice wavering with a mix of anger and disbelief. You think you can just throw everything away like this? I didn't respond immediately. I took a slow breath, letting the weight of the moment settle in. Then, I turned to her. I didn't throw anything away, Olivia. You did. You've been throwing it away for months. For years. And now, you're going to have to face the consequences. She opened her mouth, about to say something. Probably some half-hearted plea for me to reconsider. But I wasn't interested in hearing it. Not anymore. She had shown me who she was, and there was no going back from that. You don't get to just walk away from this, I said, my voice steady calm. This is the reality now. You don't get to have everything. The marriage, the affair, the lies, and then just leave without facing what you've done. For the first time, Olivia didn't argue. She didn't try to explain herself. She just stood there, her face pale, her body tense. I knew she was struggling with something, guilt, regret, fear. But none of that mattered to me anymore. Not after what she had done. She left the lawyer's office in silence, and I knew that was the last time I'd ever see her the same way again. The woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted, was gone. In her place was someone I didn't recognize. Someone who had shattered everything we had built. The next few weeks were a blur. There was no more pretending, no more games. We didn't speak much, only when necessary. The papers were filed, the process had started, and there was no turning back. Olivia tried to reach out to me once more, but I didn't answer. I didn't need to hear her voice anymore. But then, one night, she showed up at the apartment. It was late, almost midnight. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, I found Olivia standing there, her face streaked with tears. For a moment, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know whether to feel pity or anger. But the only thing I felt was exhaustion. "I made a mistake," she said, her voice shaky. "I know I hurt you. I know I broke everything we had, but I can't live with myself anymore. Please, Dorian, please forgive me." I looked at her, my heart cold. I had heard her apologies before. I had heard the tears, but none of it mattered anymore. The truth had been revealed, and no amount of pleading was going to fix it. "You had your chance," I said quietly, my voice firm. "You made your choice, Olivia, and now you have to live with it." I closed the door behind me without another word, leaving her standing there. She had made her bed, and now it was time for her to lie in it. But as I walked away from the door, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of relief. The storm had passed, and I was finally free. Free from the lies, free from the betrayal, and free from the woman who had once been my everything. It was the first step toward healing. The days after Olivia left were strangely peaceful. The silence that filled the apartment wasn't suffocating anymore. It was comforting. It was like the air had been cleared, and I could finally breathe again. The weight that had been pressing down on me for months had lifted, and now, for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was in control again. But the peace didn't last long. I wasn't naive. I knew there would be repercussions, and soon, Olivia would come back into my life one way or another. She'd been part of my world for so long that even in the absence of her presence, I felt her shadow looming over me. And it wasn't just her. It was the life we had built, the dreams we'd shared, the shared history that was now nothing but ash. I didn't expect her to reach out to me again, at least not for a while. But then, just as I was starting to regain my footing, she did. It was late one evening. Another one of those sleepless nights I had come to expect in the aftermath of everything. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. It was a message from Olivia. She had never been good at keeping things short, and this message was no different. "I know you're still angry, but I can't move forward until I know you understand why I did it. I need you to know the whole truth, Dorian. Please let me explain. I'll be waiting at our favorite place. 8 p.m. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the phone's screen. The old me, the one who used to care so deeply about what she thought, would have dropped everything to meet her, to hear her side. But that man was gone now. That man had been buried in the rubble of our marriage. And yet, despite everything, despite the fact that I wanted to hate her, to never look at her again, I found myself torn. There was a part of me, just a tiny, fragile part, that still wanted closure. I had been living in this fog of uncertainty, and maybe, just maybe, hearing her out was the final step in untangling the mess of emotions I'd been carrying around. I stood in front of the mirror for a long time before I left the apartment. The reflection staring back at me was different. I looked tired, but there was something else there too, something stronger. A man who had been broken, but had put the pieces back together. The man who was no longer a victim. When I arrived at the cafe, the place Olivia had mentioned, I found her sitting at a table near the window. She was alone. Her eyes were red, as if she had been crying. But she wasn't wearing the mask of the confident woman I had known. There was no pretending anymore. She looked vulnerable, small. I took a deep breath before walking toward her. I had no idea what I was walking into, but I had made up my mind. This would be the last conversation we would ever have. She looked up when I sat down across from her. "I didn't think you'd come," she whispered. Her voice was shaky, but there was a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "I'm here, Olivia," I said, my tone calm, but unwavering. "So let's talk." She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. "I've been trying to think of how to explain this to you, but I don't think I have the right words. All I can say is that I made a huge mistake, and I hate myself for it. I never meant for things to go this far. You have to believe me." Her words hung in the air between us, but I wasn't ready to buy into the apology just yet. "You didn't just make a mistake, Olivia. You made a choice. Over and over again. You chose him. You chose to lie to me. You chose to betray me." Her eyes filled with tears again. "I know, Dorian, and I hate myself for it. But please, understand, it wasn't about you. It wasn't about not loving you. It was about me. About my own insecurities, my own fears. Chris made me feel alive. He made me feel like I mattered." I leaned back in my chair, trying to process her words. "So, this was all about your own issues?" I asked, my voice cool but controlled. "You used him to fill some void in your life? And now what? You think that's going to make me understand? That I'm just supposed to forget everything and walk away from this?" She shook her head, her hands pressed to her face in frustration. "No. God, no. I know it's not that simple. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to want me back. But please, I need you to understand that it wasn't about not loving you. I loved you more than anything. But I was weak, and I let my own fears and doubts destroy everything." I could see the regret in her eyes, but it wasn't enough. Regret didn't change what had happened. Regret didn't undo the hurt, the lies, the betrayal. I had seen her for who she really was, and no amount of crying or pleading could change that. "Olivia," I said, my voice softening just a little, "I don't need your apologies. I don't need your explanations. What I need is to move forward. And I can't do that with you anymore." She was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "I don't expect you to take me back. I just needed you to hear me out, to understand why." "I understand," I said, standing up. "But that's the problem, Olivia. You don't understand me. You never did." I turned to leave, but then, as if something in me couldn't resist, I paused at the door. "I hope you find what you're looking for. I hope you find peace, Olivia. But it's not going to be with me." The door closed behind me with a finality I could feel deep in my bones. And in that moment, I realized something. I didn't need her to move on. I didn't need her at all. The rest of the world was out there waiting for me, and it was time for me to finally take that step. The past was done, and it was time to live for myself. The next few weeks were a blur, like waking from a dream where everything was out of focus and unclear. But slowly, piece by piece, everything started to fall into place. I spent the days filling the void Olivia had left with things that mattered, things that made me happy. I started taking care of myself again, something I hadn't done in a long time. I hit the gym, reconnected with old friends, and found time to enjoy simple things. One morning, I woke up and realized something. I had started to heal. I had started to reclaim myself. The weight I had been carrying for so long was lifting, and for the first time in ages, I felt light, unburdened. I didn't need Olivia's apology to find peace. I didn't need her to validate the choices I had made. The decision to move on had been mine, and I had stood by it. That was enough. But something unexpected happened along the way. I met someone new. It wasn't planned. It wasn't some grand strategy to replace Olivia, to distract myself. It happened by accident, on a random Saturday afternoon at a coffee shop. Her name was Maya, and she had this quiet strength about her. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was just herself. We started talking, and that conversation turned into another, then another. We shared stories, laughed over silly things, and before I knew it, I found myself looking forward to our time together. It wasn't about filling a gap or fixing what was broken. It was about enjoying life again, truly enjoying it. And Maya, with all her quirks and imperfections, was someone who brought light into my life in a way I hadn't even known I needed. A few months later, we sat on the balcony of my apartment, watching the sun set over the city. I hadn't felt this way in years. I hadn't felt so at peace with where I was, with who I had become. The past no longer haunted me. It had shaped me, yes, but it didn't define me. I never thought I'd get here, I said to Maya, turning to her with a small smile. After everything that happened, I didn't think I could move on. But here I am. Maya smiled back, her eyes soft and kind. Sometimes, you have to let go of the things that are holding you back to make room for something better. And she was right. I had let go of the past, of Olivia, of the pain, of the lies. And in doing so, I had made room for something new. Something real. Something I deserved. As I sat there with Maya, watching the world go by, I realized something important. Sometimes, the end of one chapter is just the beginning of the next. And though the road had been long, filled with hurt and heartbreak, it had also brought me to this moment. This moment where I could finally say I was whole again. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited to find out.